Section 19. The Quran. The Quran is the sacred text of Islam and is considered by Muslims to be the miraculous revelation of God's word through the Prophet Muhammad. While Muhammad's conviction that he was the final prophet of God could be plausibly explained naturalistically, if there is something in the Quran that seems miraculous or naturally inexplicable, then that would greatly strengthen his claims to divine inspiration. In this section, we will evaluate the evidence for and against the Quran's divine authorship, considering both the traditional Islamic perspective and potential naturalistic explanations. It is suggested that the beauty and poetic style of the Quranic language, originally spoken by Muhammad, is a testament to a divine source, considering he was illiterate. While this position is inherently highly subjective, the implicit suggestion is that you must be literate to produce beautiful prose. This proposition is weakened when one considers oral composition and memorization were highly developed skills in ancient Arabia, and poetic or rhythmic wordcraft was a common means of making verses easier to memorize. Furthermore, many great works of prose have been produced by illiterate poets and sages throughout history. The ancient Greek epics of Homer, the Theogony of Hesiod, and the fables of Aesop are all examples of how poetic genius and oral cultural tradition can give rise to remarkable prose without direct divine inspiration. Other notable cases include the ancient Celtic bards and druids, or the West African griots, all of whom have produced works of great beauty and wisdom through oral composition and performance. Moreover, while Muhammad may not have been formally literate, he was immersed in the rich oral culture of Arabia and had ample opportunity to develop his poetic and rhetorical skills over the course of his life. By the time he began his prophetic calling at the age of 40, he had over 2 decades of experience as a merchant and public figure, interacting with people from diverse religious and cultural backgrounds. During the 23 years of his prophetic activity, he was also surrounded by many literate followers who helped to transcribe and preserve his revelations. In such an environment, it is not impossible he would have been able to sharpen his own poetic ability over time. It is also worth noting the primary mode of transmission for what would become the Quran was oral, with the text being memorized and recited by Muhammad's companions. Written fragments of the Quran were recorded on various materials such as parchment, stone, and palm leaves, but these served mainly as aids to memorization rather than as a definitive text. It was only after Muhammad's death that the scattered revelations were compiled into a standardized written form, first under the Caliphate of Abu Bakr, and then more definitively under the direction of Uthman ibn Affan, who had alternative compilations of Muhammad's words destroyed. Moving beyond the linguistic beauty and composition of the Quran, many Muslims also believe that the Quran contains scientific knowledge that was far ahead of its time and could not have been known to a 6th century Arab without divine inspiration. Passages related to embryology, cosmology, and the water cycle are often cited as evidence of the Quran's miraculous nature. However, a closer examination of these passages suggests that they may reflect the prevailing scientific theories of the time, rather than a miraculous precognition of modern discoveries. The Quranic description of embryological development, for example, bears similarities to the ideas of ancient Greek physicians like Galen and Hippocrates, as well as Indian medical texts. Surah Al-Mu'minun 23:12-14 recites, "And indeed, we created man, Adam, out of an extract of clay, water and earth. Thereafter, we made him, the offspring of Adam, as a nutfah, mixed drops of the male and female sexual discharge and lodged it in a safe lodging, womb of the woman. Then we made the nutfah into a clot, a piece of thick coagulated blood. Then we made the clot into a little lump of flesh. Then we made out of that little lump of flesh bones. Then we clothed the bones with flesh, and then we brought it forth as another creation. So blessed be Allah, the best of creators." Galen was a Roman physician who lived over 400 years before Muhammad. He dissected animals at different stages of pregnancy to learn more about embryology, and wrote that the embryo developed from a fluid that coagulated after being retained in the womb, forming flesh and then bones, which were subsequently covered with flesh. By the time Muhammad was alive centuries later, It is plausible that this view would be mainstream even in the 6th century Arabia. There is also an inconsistency in the way that potentially scientific passages in the Quran are interpreted. While some verses can plausibly be read as scientific foresights of natural phenomena, like the Big Bang theory in Surah Al-Anbiya 21:30, others that seem to greatly conflict with today's science, like man being made of clay, the sun setting in mud, or the stars being missiles to ward off demons, are often treated as metaphorical or allegorical. The selective interpretation of some verses as literal scientific statements while treating others as metaphorical or allegorical, particularly when a naturalistic reading is also plausible, raises questions about the consistency of the hermeneutical approach and the potential influence of confirmation bias. Beyond scientific foresight, the Quran presents an alternative account of the crucifixion of Jesus, suggesting that he didn't actually die, but that it only appeared so to his enemies, whereas Christians claim Jesus really died on the cross. Islamic tradition holds that the Quranic description of the event is a correction of the earlier gospel accounts, rather than a contradiction. This claim would strengthen or weaken the case for the Quran, depending on how strong the opposing evidence is for the death and resurrection of Christ. Regardless, a critical examination of the Quran's language, structure, and content suggests that while it is undoubtedly a work of great beauty and power, it did not have to be miraculous to exist. The literary qualities of the Quran, while remarkable, can be understood as the product of Muhammad's undeniable poetic genius and his immersion in the Abrahamic oral traditions and circumstances of his time. As for the scientific passages, rather than being miraculous anticipations of modern knowledge, they may just reflect the prevailing theories of the ancient world. None of this is to deny the profound ethical teachings of the Quran, nor to suggest that a naturalistic account of its origins is the only possible explanation. The Quran remains a text of immense spiritual and historical significance, and engagement with its message is essential for understanding the Islamic tradition and fostering interfaith dialogue. However, a commitment to critical inquiry and historical analysis requires us to consider the plausibility of naturalistic factors in shaping the rise of Islam, while remaining open to alternative perspectives and further evidence.